Alrighty, let's take a look at Game 5 of the World Championship match. Gukesh versus Ding Liren. Gukesh playing white, Ding Liren playing black. Gukesh was seemingly pressing in his first two white games. Went e4 in the first one, d4 in the second one. So he goes e4 in this one. e6, d4, d5. E takes d5. Now I do want to say one thing here. I saw a lot of people criticizing Ding for his opening prep in Game 4. And saying, that's a feckless way to play. It's not a serious way to fight for an edge. Why would he waste a white like that? Well, I didn't hear any of those same people saying that about this game, which was really weird because, if you're going to play the exchange French, you have to have a pretty serious idea. Was he going to go for an IQP or provoke the opponent to go for an IQP? Is there some imbalance he's going to go for? I said here, I don't think anyone expected the exchange French. So e takes d5, knight of 3, knight of 6, bishop to d3, just a standard square for the bishop. That's usually what's played, and it gives the possibility of queen e2 check afterwards. And I know that Kasparov once played this, but yeah, we all know it's not a very serious try. So there are a couple of other moves that have been played, like for example, knight c6 has been played with bishop to g4 or bishop f5 in certain lines. I know there was a Meyer course where he suggested a plan like this. The Geary course on Chessable suggests playing c5 exactly as played in the game. So Ding Liren played the Geary line from the Chessable course. I'm surprised on chess.com while they were broadcasting they didn't say buy the course now, because I actually know people who bought that course. I have students who play according to that course and they think it's excellent. So that is a good course to be playing the French defense on. Just kind of think about it logically. Do you really expect the 2750s analysis to be not good enough for someone who's, let's say, 1800 to play? Of course it is. So yeah, this course is quite good. All right, so c3 was played. Yeah, if you take on c5, you're developing the bishop with tempo and giving black pretty easy play. So c4, standard move, bishop to c2, bishop to d6. Now queen e2 check. And queen e7. Now, after queen takes c7 check, when I was watching the game, I will admit, I was slightly nervous for Ding. I thought, he's going to take a while over these next couple of moves. If he gets behind on the clock by, let's say, 25 minutes, that could be a problem. If the endgame gets complex, maybe white can play b3 at the right moment, get a good pawn break at a certain moment when he's low on time, make the game sharp. Another thing that could be played, I put in a kind of funny line that was sort of Steinitzian. I'll show you what I mean by that. He loved to put his knights on the back rank. Castle, rook e1, hitting the bishop, knight c6, defending it. Knight e5, bishop to d6. Knight e2, rook e8, increasing the pressure. And then here I'll go for bishop f5. Try to trade off my bishop for this quite good white bishop here. Bishop f4, bishop f5. I'll just go rook e d8. Knight g5, trying to hit that pawn. Actually, I do have a tactic here based on this loose bishop. Bishop g3, and I thought this was a funny move to play this, where you defend the square and then you play h6. I just thought that was a funny way to play. But yeah, the position's obviously fine for black. So clearly completely fine for black. All right, so king takes e7 was played. Yeah, and now what he's going to do is he's just going to go rook e8 and castle by hand. So he's just going to go king f8 if given the chance. So castles, rook e8, rook e1 check, king f8, rook takes e8 check, king takes e8. Now I did see some people pointing out that there are lines where white can play stuff like b3, and a lot of people thought that he's forced to take. Now, there are many lines where black doesn't have to take. There are many lines where black can play b5, a4, take b4. And if that's played at the right time, black can even end up better in certain cases. So white has to be very careful about the undermining here, because if it's done incorrectly, it might not actually be effective. Okay, so bishop g5 was played. That was good, by the way. Most natural plan, take and take. So, of course, knight bd7 is played. Now, the most critical move here was just to go knight h4. I go g6, of course, guarding the f5 square. Now I go here. And I also have a way of kind of unraveling my pieces. I have knight e8, I have knight e7, I have knight f8, and then knight e7, knight e6. So let's say here, knight f8, bishop f4. I'm going to take that. Go knight e7. I can just go here. Yeah, really no problems. The king is perfectly stable here on d6, and I can just go knight e6. So knight e6. Knight g2, knight g7, bing, bing, bing. I just trade off my bad bishop for the bishop on c2, and the position is clearly equal. But I figured he was going to play something like that, and I thought it might be worthwhile to play that just to make Ding have to find a move like knight g8. Because the way to think about these knights is that they're somewhat superfluous knights, because they're controlling a lot of the same squares and tripping over the same squares, so oftentimes you want to coordinate the knights and get them directly next to each other and not being stuck defending one another. If they're stuck defending one another, I mean, obviously the d7 knight isn't in need of defense. But if they were, I would call that codependent knights. So it's just nice to sort of break the codependence and have better coordination. Okay, so h6 played, bishop h4, and now knight h5. I did like knight h5. I thought that was a really nice move. I mean, if nothing else, we have lines where we can play g5, where we can play knight f4, a bunch of good different lines with this. But you could also play b5 here. You could also play b5, like let's say b5, a5. Say I go bishop f4 here. I just simply take a knight b6. Yeah, very comfortable play. Clearly d5 is not a problem. I did see a GM say that he liked this maneuver, knight f1 to e3 right away, being somewhat critical of Gukesh's play. Yeah, I mean, I think this is very sensible, but logical for both sides and no real weaknesses, so clearly equal. Knight h5. Yeah, so if a4, I'll just do this, and then I can play knight df6. So knight f1, knight df6. Here I can go g5, and here I can just go king g7. Knight e3, and just like before, bishop e6, nice and cozy, everything secure, so no problems at all for black. Check. King f8, g4, knight f4. Now, there are some threats here. For example, knight b6 is an idea, hitting that pawn on g4, so they will have to watch out for that. Bishop g3, he goes ahead with knight b6. Yeah, when I was watching the game, I thought g5 might be a little bit more serious, like knight f1, knight f6, going after that pawn. Although there is h4 at the end of that. Take, h4, and then there's bishop f5. So that seems to be equalizing. You just get the pawn back. Take. I mean, sure, black can play rook g8, but I think that position's equal. So knight to b6 was played. Now, of course, he's attacking the pawn, so g5 is played. I gave it an exclamation mark, but yeah, only move. Take. Bishop to d7. Yeah, and now there was some discussion. Should white just play knight f1? Sure, I said knight f1 is the best move, but of course black is very solid here. Knight e3, I can just go back. h4, I can just go f6. Here I can go bishop a4. Say bishop f5. Let's go back. And I can play bishop h5. I mean, I thought this is an interesting way to at least try to press a little bit. Try to do, get some initiative a little bit with black. But you can certainly see that White's play has been risky here and has not really achieved anything. So nothing has really been achieved yet. All right, so knight f3, knight gf3. Yeah, I actually thought that rook d8 was a little bit more precise. This was also a major topic of discussion, not allowing too many exchanges, trying to play for more. Again, it's going to be equal at very high depth according to the computer, but I thought that was interesting to throw in. Of course, in my line, I am playing rook e8 anyway, and coming back. Bishop takes. Now I play knight a4. Which is kind of a key move in a lot of these lines. Go b5. I just go g6. But you could certainly make an argument that black has a very slight initiative. Ding has a very slight initiative here. But I was amazed kind of following this game because all of the criticisms that Ding got in the previous game, you would think would apply to Gukesh here, but I guess the people commenting all think that that Gukesh has such a practical advantage in the match that they expect him to win, that they're not even being critical of his opening choices. Personally, I thought, well, why not just play in a super sharp way? Because Ding has had the hardest time when the positions have gotten really out of control. So rook e8 was played, now knight e5. That's a good move. Bishop takes e5. Now, what to take with? He played d takes c5. That was a bad move. You should take with the rook. Now, here's the reason for taking the rook. Taking with the rook. One of the reasons is that you do actually want to trade rooks, but also take a look at this line. Check here. Knight c1. Take. Bishop f4. Now, this is a key move because now I have tactics involving knight takes c4. So, take. Bring the king over here, knight c1, and then knight takes c4. I get my tactic in. But, I mean, with the black knight in the center of the board, it's got to be a draw. It's got to be a draw here. h4, b5. Just go a5. Bishop e4 and bishop e6. Yeah, that's clearly equal. But d takes c5 was played, so white did not successfully bail out. As I like to say, don't fail to bail when your position is frail. You have to bail out with white if your opening prep doesn't go according to plan. So knight d3, bishop takes, pawn takes. Now this was a really interesting moment because f3 is certainly a move, trying to bring the king up or even pull the bishop back to f2. There was also a discussion about bishop f4 potentially being like a little bit more precise than f3. I mean, there's an argument for both, but I actually think f3, while looking a little bit questionable, is not that bad of a choice. So f3 was played. Now, there was also a discussion here. About moves like knight a4. So knight a4, rook b1, and f6. And then the key idea here is if takes, you just rush down here with this, and you try to go for complete paralysis with bishop h3, keeping the king locked in, and trying to win the ending with the hog on the 7th rank where you're down a pawn. But there's actually an interesting move here. I can play king f2, takes, and then c4. That's actually a very interesting choice because both of the pawns could be attackable. Now, there is e4, but then I can play take, king to e3. Now, this is certainly the type of position that you could do deep analysis on, but my conclusion was that white's able to draw this. I mean, of course, the opposite colored bishops also assist in that, making that a little bit easier, but yeah, this will definitely be a draw. So, no, you could say, well, do we have a way to make it more interesting? Maybe rook e6 is an idea, trying to be a little bit more subtle with that idea, because, I mean, of course, the idea is to play this and then go rook b6, try to increase the pressure here. But it's not actually that simple here, because there are also moves here. Like, I think I can play... You know what I think I can play here? I think I can play, like, knight b3 here, rook d1. Here's a little stutter step. Take, rook d2, chasing the knight away. And then I take, and then I go here. And the goal with all of that is to just make a lot of trades here. So take, rook d2, take, rook e3, trade off rooks, and then essentially say, okay, yes, I am down a pawn, but if we get the knights off the board, for example, or even if we don't, but if we get the knights off the board, it certainly makes things much more drawish with opposite colored bishops. Is black going to be able to create a strong pass pawn? Because if black isn't, we're probably talking about a draw here. So yeah, I think something like rook takes e6. I think something like rook takes e6 looks very drawish. So there were arguments for rook e6. There were arguments for knight a4. But I did give an exclamation mark to knight c4. I actually did think that was the best move. But there was one very clever idea that Ding could have played for here. Now, I did really deep analysis on this, and I did conclude that it objectively should have been a draw. But, yeah, I mean, there are people saying, yeah, he should have pressed more, he should have fought much more. He should have tried everything possible in the position to try to win. I mean, yeah, it's easy to say that after the game. I would say that the one mistake that he made was this bishop c6 move, because after rook to d4, after rook d4, bishop takes king f2. Yeah, it's just getting more and more unlikely that he'll be able to win this. So I thought the best line was bishop to e6, which, by the way, the computer way overestimates this. At first, like engines might give this +1, but you keep playing out moves and you keep trying to find a concrete way to make progress. So this move has a couple of different ideas. One of the ideas is this, and trying to come over here with rook b5. But there's this beautiful prophylactic move, bishop f2, stopping that idea. You know what? There's another point here too. If rook c6, that can also be countered in certain lines. Well, not here because of taking and d2. But there are certain lines where rook d6 is playable when the king is closer by, of course. So if the king were closer, you would have a move like rook to d6. So yeah, here I have bishop to e3, king h7, king f2. So now the king is closer. Now the king is closer, so I have resources like rook d6 now, like I was saying. Now, there was some analysis on this that I saw by a grandmaster talking about black having superb winning chances here, but this is one of those cases where you have to prove it. You have to actually prove what you have here. So I played out some moves. I analyzed tons of stuff with the computer. And it's just really hard to turn this into anything. I'll show you the main line I looked at. A lot of shuffling, a lot of nothing happening. Rook e8, rook f4, rook g8. I go back with king g6 because I didn't achieve anything. I go back with rook c8. Yeah, a lot of shuffling here. I was thinking about a rook lift. Yeah, so here's the thing. Even when I get rook b5, the bishop just drops back. So the king is close by here. So let's say I do this. Or actually, no, in this line I was using the king. I'll use the king in this line. Rook a8, king d2, rook a5, bishop e3, rook b5, king c1, king h7. And I said black's slightly better here, but my point here is that you can't just look at a computer score and just say, okay, it's winning. Actually, I can give you an example of that. There was a game, I believe the game was Stockfish Komodo, I think, from about a year ago. And Stockfish said plus 2.5. I think it was queen and pawn versus rook and bishop, I believe. And you know what? There was a fortress. He wasn't able to break through. And so that's why you have to think about, well, what are the different threats to win the game? And think about the different ways that you would try to win an endgame like this. Well, queen to pass pawn. Well, there's the pawn on d3, but it's nicely contained. Win a decisive amount of material. Are you winning more material in white's camp? No, you're not. So you're getting short on options. Attack the opponent's king. Are you attacking the white king? Well, no, we don't have enough force for that. So you're just simply very limited. So a score like -1, that would be a case where if the computer had a score like -1, I wouldn't trust it. You have to play it out. You have to prove it. Now, if it's a middle game with all the pieces on the board for both sides, then you have a score of +1. Then I might be worried that the score would be trending upwards. Like, oh, that might go up to +1.5, +2. If you're 2 pawns up, I mean, typically not talking about a fortress like I was describing at the end of the game. But, in an endgame like this, if the score is below, let's say, +1.2, it's nearly always a draw just because it's trending downwards. It's trending downwards because a lot of what engines will do in these types of positions is just shuffle a lot where they can keep that high score. And then suddenly, as they get closer and closer to move to the 50 move rule, you see the score drop and drop and drop unless there's a concrete plan. Are we pushing a pass pawn? Are we winning something? What exactly are we doing? And so I think that the people who were saying that this was almost winning for black were kind of exaggerating. I would say slightly better for black, but I wouldn't give this as a hard like -1, -1.2. This is not really quite that territory. And like I said before, in this position, there were a couple of tries. Knight a4, knight c4, rook e6. it's a little unfair to Ding to basically say, oh, he had a winning position here. So I am criticizing that idea, but I also like what he did. I mean, it's quite possible that Gukesh could have been nervous having to play down a pawn in certain lines, whereas in the game he was down a pawn. Now he went bishop c6, but bishop h5 was much better. The pawn can't be captured, of course, because of d2. So he has to go here, b5, b3, rook c8. I go g6. Now the problem here is similar to before. So there are 5 pawns for black and 4 for white, but the bishop is not doing all that much here. Yeah, we're trading off another pair of pawns here. And yeah, it's just simply very, very difficult to actually push anything here and win. So I said black's a little bit better here. I mean, like I was saying before, it can be debatable. I mean, are we actually going to win this with black? It's going to be very hard to do. But a really interesting choice. Still, of course, bishop h5 should have been played. Would have posed the most problems. And notice the move number. Okay, 33, 34. If you could force Gukesh to have to find these moves and play well up to move 40, maybe there's a chance he doesn't play a move like king f5. Maybe he doesn't play a move that aggressive. And then maybe he actually ends up in a bit of trouble before move 40, and then black gets more of an edge after move 40 when we reach the second time control. So that was certainly a possibility. So bishop c6 was played, gobbled up the pawn here. And yeah, rook d8 was played. And then they traded off rooks. I mean, this was also playable. g5. Say I go here. Take. I mean, you can't really make too much of an argument that black is really going to be pressing here. This is a draw. This is going to be a draw here. So rook d4, it's a draw. So anyway, rook d8, rook d4. Yeah, well played by Gukesh. He did a good job of just keeping this under control. Take, bishop d5, hitting that pawn. b3, king e3. Yep. He just gave up the pawn because he has an easy fortress. Yeah. King c3, a6, king d3, king f5, and just shuffled here. Yeah, I mean, there's really no way that anything could be done. Even if he was able to play b5 at a certain point, take, you simply trade off. The bishop guards this. So we have a firm blockade where you can just shuffle the bishop back and forth. So there's no way to make any progress from there. But I do essentially dispute the idea that Ding was easily winning. The only criticism I have is that he should have been able to pose more problems for his opponent. But yeah, I mean, I think kind of lackluster preparation from Gukesh because I think that he shouldn't have traded queens. I think you should play a line where you keep the queens on the board and, you make Ding burn some time on the clock and you give him a much harder position to play. So I would argue that he made a mistake in the handling of this position type. And, it turned out he was the one who was defending. And, yeah, it's really hard to say, but I did like what was played initially. I just think that I think he should have gone into this, forced Gukesh to find that very subtle bishop to f2 move. Maybe he doesn't find that and loses the game. But, at the very least, you could absolutely play this out till move 75. And, that could give him a little bit of a psychological initiative in the match. If he said, hey, you know what? I played the best moves. I put my opponent under ridiculous pressure for 45, 50 moves with black. Now I get to play white. Now I'm going to increase the pressure again. So, unfortunately, kind of a lackluster opening line from Gukesh, which I was surprised that people didn't really criticize him for that. People were basically saying, Magnus Carlsen would love to be playing the white side of this, whereas that may be true. There was a criticism made of Ding's play in Game 4, whereas these are pretty similar. I actually think that Ding had more chances for an opening edge in the previous game than Gukesh did in this one because I mean, maybe he could have played that knight h4 move on move 14. Could have tried something like that. But this line really didn't. I mean, this line has really been milked dry. There's really nothing in this. But I liked what Ding did, and I was glad he didn't get low on time because, what I would like to not see is one of the players just get low on time and just lose on time in some equal position on move 35. Like, I think that would be the worst case scenario for the fans, because when you have no increment and you have to reach the time control, if you get down to 30 seconds and you have to make 3 or 4 moves, you might just lose on time. I had a situation where I was in a time scramble with an FM, no increment, and he just lost on time because I just moved faster than he did. And at a certain point, I said, "Hey, I just gotta have to play with the clock here. I just have to play sound, simple moves really quickly if they don't alter the position." My opponent just kept going tweedledee-dum, lost on time. So, yeah, an interesting overall an interesting game, but would have liked to see Ding press a little bit more. But I just hope he gets his chances. I just hope he gets more. I heard people say, you don't know how many more chances you're going to get like this in a match. There is some truth to that, but hopefully there will be some more chances to squeeze a little bit. This would have been good to see on the board, something like this. But hopefully he has some more confidence in his black games, because 2 of the black games have gone excellently, and he for the most part did pretty well after the opening. He really only lost game 3 because he got his piece trapped. So as long as he doesn't get any pieces trapped, he should do fine. But that'll wrap up this video. Check out Chess Culture on Facebook. I think you'll like it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.